Hi everyone, and welcome back to my Zero to Keystone Master Challenge series, episode 2. My goal this week is to get as close to possible to 1000 Mythic Plus rating. This week's affixes are Tyrannical, Incorporeal, and Spiteful, so I need to make sure that the group has at least 2 CCs for managing the Incorporeal ads. To kick off this week, I started by opening up my vault, which resulted in me getting a nice new 421 item level chess piece. After this, I picked up the weekly quests, aiding the Accord in Valdrakken and a worthy ally in Zalarek Caverns. Very fortunately, after picking up these quests, the Expedition Under Fire event was underway, which I managed to join and complete. This gave me a minor upgrades to my boot slot. After the event, I completed a couple world quests for gold and one that rewarded a cape upgrade. The worthy ally quest gave me some 402 legs, and I also completed some dig sites but received no noteworthy reward. The last part of my weekly things to complete was a time rift to gain a new token, which I could use to spend on a second weapon. Completing the time rift also gave me enough of the currency to purchase a 402 trinket, leaving me at 395 item level. With all that done, I was ready to start my Mythic Plus grind. For the dungeons, I invited the first 3 people that applied to fill any missing role. The affixes this week are Tyrannical, Incorporeal, and Spiteful, so at the very least I needed to make sure that each group had enough CC to deal with the 2 ads that can spawn from the Incorporeal affix. The first key was a Halls of Infusion plus 5. Nothing particularly noteworthy happened throughout the run. The key was 3-chested and I was lucky enough to get a 408 trinket. This dungeon rose my rating up to 248. The first key was a Halls of Infusion plus 5. Nothing particularly noteworthy happened throughout the run. The key was 3-chested and I was lucky enough to get a 408 trinket. This dungeon rose my rating up to 248. The second key was a Vortex Pinnacle 8. At this point I was slowly getting a little more comfortable with Vengeance Demon Hunter and tried making bigger pulls. Other than that, nothing worth mentioning throughout the run happened. The key was 3-chested, no loot was received, but it did raise my rating up to 315. The very next key was a Neltharian's Lair 11. Here is where some things started to go not quite so smoothly anymore. The biggest issue over the course of the run was the Incorporeal affix, and the ads not being managed. At the start of the dungeon, I got a little too greedy with the pull and ended up dying as a result. Rather than letting the ads reset, we continued to try kite them, but when those attempts failed, we ultimately had to let them reset, leaving us at 8 deaths at the start of the dungeon before reaching the first boss. The first boss went smoothly, with no issues over the course of the fight. On the way to the second boss, we had a further 2 deaths, due to the Incorporeal ads getting off a double debuff, resulting in me and the rogue dying. Unfortunately, I didn't see the ads, as I was backed up against the wall for this pack. Second boss, no problem at all, and we had no deaths on the way to the third boss. A few problems occurred on the third boss. We wiped due to a combination of the Incorporeal debuffs and the boss receiving 2 buffs from the Devouring the Ads. The second attempt we managed to get the boss down without any problems. On our way to the 4th and final boss, no issues occurred. However, early on in the fight of the 4th boss, the rogue died from trying to tank the big ad, and then the magma waved. The warrior and the shaman didn't line of sight, and the attempt eventually ended up in a wipe. For the second attempt, things went much better. Had 1 death towards the end of the fight. Despite all the deaths, we managed to time the key with 3 minutes to spare. This took my rating up to 462. Onto a level 12 Underrot. This run went much smoother than the Neltharian's Lair I just completed. Everyone was CCing the Incorporeal ads and interrupting casts, which allowed us to complete the dungeon very quickly with a +3 timer. I was also very lucky and got the fist weapon, which I'll most likely be using for the rest of this challenge. This run took me up to a Mythic Plus rating of 626 and my item level up to 396. I thought that running a +14 might be a little too difficult at this stage in the run and decided to drop the key back down to level 12. The next dungeon, a Freehold +12. A fairly uneventful run, the affix was managed well and people interrupted throughout the dungeon. A couple of deaths throughout, but nothing too major. There was 1 wipe on the trash just before the final boss when the patrol got pulled along with the other 2 packs just after the bridge on the way to the final boss. Otherwise, a fairly smooth run that ended up being 2-chested and raising my rating up to 786. I decided to push my luck with a plus 14 underrot this time. However, it appears that my luck was not enough as the group ended up falling apart eventually. Overall, it was a very messy run, almost wiping on the first boss. Everything was going well up until where I died from a mixture of too many healing absorb casts going through and the healer not being able to heal through. I died and slowly the rest of the group followed. However, I received a combat res for the last few percent of the boss which I took, and just by the skin of my teeth I managed to take it down. We had a couple of the deaths on the way to the second boss, but nothing too major. The second boss went down without too much trouble. We cleared to the third boss and had 3 deaths on the first harvest. As the boss was at 50%, I decided to reset. Shortly after the reset, the paladin left, followed by other members of the group. After the failure of the Underrot 14, I formed another group for the downgraded key. This run went much better. Everything was going smoothly with not much worth mentioning happening until the third boss, where we had a wipe. The DPS dropped the upheaval mechanic on the green mushrooms in front of the boss instead of the mushrooms on the other side, causing the shockwave from the boss to not hit any mushrooms, resulting in us dying from the festival harvest. Despite the wipe, we got the boss down on the second attempt and then finished the run without any further issues, resulting in a +2 to the key. No loot again, but this raised my rating a little to 794. Now I had a choice to make. Do I try to run the +15 Halls of Infusion key I just got, or should I downgrade it? After my experience with the +14 Underrot run, I thought it would be better to lower the level a little, and so I took it down to a level 12. This run was quite cursed. Firstly, it started with a wipe of the first boss. I then had a DC, causing us to lose a few minutes. We then had a wipe on the gauntlet, mostly due to me getting greedy and accidentally jumping into one of the waves, causing me to die. I got a res but died instantly when accepting it. This caused a DPS to go offline and another to leave. With the key downgraded to an 11, I opted to try again. This run went much better, with a wipe on the gauntlet. Despite that, we still managed to 2-chest the timer, bringing my rating up to 855. I also got a duplicate of the trinket I received from my first Mythic Plus. This reset, albeit with a slightly higher item level. The new key was an Eltharian's Lair +13, which I decided to not downgrade. A very good group overall for this dungeon. We did happen to have a wipe on Naraxus. Multiple things went wrong during that fight. The boss got a Devour stack from the ads. The mage died to the Rancid Maw, resulting in me trying to manage 2 incorporeal ads and missing the spiked tongue, causing me to be eaten and wiping the group. The second attempt, the mage did die once again, but we managed to get the boss down. We ended up only getting 1 chest on this key and no loot. This did raise my rating a little to 877. For the last key of the week, I decided to try my luck with a +14 Bracken Hide. Once again, this was a mistake. Up until the first boss, things were going well. No deaths, casts were interrupted, ads were CC'd. At the start of the first boss, our healer died fairly early into the fight, and as we had no combat res, I opted to reset the boss. We had another wipe on the boss. I underestimated the amount of damage the charge would do and died. Unfortunately, we'd already used the combat res on the Shadow Priest. On the third attempt, we did manage to get the boss down finally. On the way to Treemouth, the healer DC'd just as I made a rather large pull, resulting in a wipe. But we recovered and made it to Treemouth. The boss was very easily dealt with and there were no issues on the way or during the third boss gut shot. Moving forwards towards the final boss, there were no issues on the way. On our first attempt, we wiped due to the totem not dying soon enough. On the run back, we had a mispull, which then resulted in more packs being pulled and another wipe occurring. Running back a second time, a different pack was pulled, which we managed to kill, and finally on the second attempt of the boss we managed to get it down as people started to focus the totems. This run took almost an hour and resulted in obtaining 0 rating and no loot. Before I logged off for the final time before reset, I used my flight stones and crests to upgrade as much gear as I could, taking my item level from 397 to 403. At the end of the week, I'm sitting at 16,500 gold, 403 item level, and 877 Mythic Plus rating. The goal for the next episode will be to try and push as close to 1500 rating as possible with the time that I have. That's all for today, but if you liked the video, please feel free to give it a like, comment, and subscribe.